everybody, my name is Zach REDRUP, you're listening to the It's Not a Phase podcast, and on this episode I'm joined by Mark Threlfall, who is a tour manager. We talk all about what a tour manager is and does, why he became a tour manager, tips for those looking to pursue a career in tour management, the need to be constantly prepared for the unexpected, and loads more. Now, if you enjoyed this or any other episode of the podcast and you want to show your support, there's a few ways that you can do that. Number one, leave a rating and review wherever you're listening to this. It takes just a few seconds and it really does help. Number two, share this on your social media, whether that be Instagram, Twitter, Facebook, wherever. Or number three, if you want to go the extra mile, you can pay a little bit each month to join the Patreon, and in return you'll get access to episodes early along with some other perks, or you can pick up some merch from the store. All the links to that and the podcast socials where you can follow us can be found at itsnotaphase.co.uk. That's itsnotaphase.co.uk. And now with all that out of the way, let's jump right into this week's episode of It's Not a Phase. What's up everybody? Thank you for joining me on this episode of It's Not a Phase, where I'm joined by Mark Threlfall, who is a tour manager and a production manager, is that right?
Yeah, in many terms, yeah.
Yeah. Basically a jack of all trades.
Yeah, that much is true. Yeah.
Yeah, how you doing, man?
I'm not too bad, thank you, man. Yeah, not too bad. Cannot complain and won't complain. How are you? You're good?
Yeah, all good, man. All good. Yeah, we were just saying you're sat in a hotel in sunny Nottingham right now, so...
Oh, yeah. Yeah, middle of the road hotel in Nottingham. But it's a day off and hey, they're appreciated, so...
They come far and few between, so take advantage.
You are not kidding. Yeah, absolutely.
So I guess we'll just get to the very basics. For people who are listening who aren't quite sure what a tour manager is and does, what is a tour manager? What do they do? Honestly,
the best way to put it is you're just the defense mechanism in the final line of defense for absolutely everything, pre the band or pre the artist or pre the entertainer. So, you're responsible for booking every single logistical element of a tour. You're responsible for ensuring that all venues or spaces or events are aware of what you're rolling in with. You have to be across, and that's even, down to the last minute things that get thrown in where, you're a week out from tour and all of a sudden everything's getting changed out. It's being consistently across those things. And then on the road, it's making sure everyone's on time, everyone's safe, everyone's fed and watered, everyone's showered, and everyone is comfortable. It really is an overarching role of how many plates can you spin, really, because essentially you're the first person that people come and ask something to. And also then once they went round the houses and asked everyone, you're also the last. You all encompass it all, really.
So basically like the parent of the tour.
Yes, exactly that. Yeah, and at times it does feel like that, but yeah, you are really there as the parent and the person who's to protect the artist in every way. So
I mentioned it a moment ago. Along with being a tour manager, you've also got experience as like a production manager and as an artist manager. Can you I know that they're all like big jobs, but can you kind of briefly explain the difference between those roles and the importance in those roles in the industry?
Yeah, so my production management experience is much lesser than my tour management experience, but generally production manager versus tour manager is the production manager will be focusing on stage. And, when you're either bringing in PA or bringing in a light package or bringing in a stage show, their version of the artist would be all of those elements that go onto stage and the crew that are also helping bring that all together. So as a production manager, as opposed to, running around after an artist doing the laundry or, making sure that they're not sick or all of those other things that are day to day as a tour manager, you're loading in with a crew of 6 or 7 or 8 people and you're building a stage every single day and you're overseeing absolutely everything to do with the show technically, as well as when the show's up, if something goes wrong, where normally with the tour manager, if something was to go wrong on the road, everyone would immediately look at you. If a light was to break halfway through a show, all eyes would point to the production manager to be like, well, where's the fix? And then the difference from that from artist management, artist management just being the day-to-day, absolutely all elements of the artist's business, from their record deal to their agent to absolutely everything. And again, I do that as... I started that roughly around the same time I started tour managing, and it is very much, it's a big passion of mine, and I think I wish I had a little bit more time to dedicate to it. With just being on the road so much, you don't get as much time as what you would always like, but it's a very, very fulfilling role, and it ultimately is more about the progression of an artist in stature and progression personally, more so than just making sure their tours are successful. You're in charge of making sure that their entire business model is successful and that it's profitable for all and is ever growing and ever developing.
Well, I guess less so the artist management, like you say, but production and tour management, I guess, where required, that those roles kind of come hand in hand, don't they? Because obviously you're managing the production of a band on the tour,
Yeah,
or you're just managing the band as a whole on the tour.
true. And I think it's an interesting one because a lot of the times where budget does dictate everything. That, that's the biggest conversation in touring is budget, but tour management and production management end up bleeding into one at a certain level of artist where you're up in roughly like Academy One size rooms and there isn't budget to bring a production manager in, but the band still want to bring things in that make the show that little bit more special. And it might only be something simple like a small, like package on the floor, but it ultimately is still on your head. And it's like, well, now you're bleeding the roles a little bit, but ultimately, yeah, they can be very much one and the same. Where a lot of tour managers do production manage, and a lot of production managers also have all of the key skills to make a really good tour manager.
Well, I guess that's kind of tour management in a nutshell, isn't it? You've got kind of the usual day-to-day stuff that, needs to be done. But I guess there's so many occasions where things kind of crop up that you weren't initially planning to do, but need to be done. Like sometimes you've got to look after, last minute guest list things or press things. And then you've got like merch management as well, when that needs to kind of come into play.
Oh yeah. And the last minute things for tour management is just never ending. I think that's one thing that I don't think anyone could ever prepare you for. You could do a 101 on how to be a tour manager and you could sit down and teach a class of kids how to do it. But what you can never teach them is, oh, your vocalist is sick. You've got to cancel a show and sit in A&E with them for 9 hours. That's the sort of stuff you're just never physically going to be able to prepare for. And it's an element of the job that you just go, well, that wasn't on my bingo this week. I didn't think I'd be sitting in A&E all night. And yeah, I think even going over to like merch management, its own separate role, at a certain level is so time consuming. To get that all correct it just takes hours and hours of labor, but it is all, again, comes back to the tour manager at one level where you go, well, you're going to have to look over that too.
Well, I guess some people, from kind of the outside would look at like merch management there, like they think it's fairly simple on the surface because it's just kind of like you've got these 3 different kind of t-shirt designs and then you just need to keep a stock on shirt sizes and sales and stuff, but it's not always as simple as that.
No, of course not. And it does look really easy. I guess outside in, you just go, oh, well, you're just dropping t-shirts off at a concession stand or, you're just selling. But it's like, well, no, it's your stock management and it's your unit cost. And, it's even down to like if you are a concession or, you're at a point where you're having to argue those sorts of things back. And even, looking throughout the tour and going, well, say we're 3 days off a London show and you go, well, I've got 40 mediums left and can't really in good faith sell all of those tonight, knowing that we're in London in 3 days and we haven't got the lead time to get more delivered. It's like that sort of active mind as a merchandise manager where you go, well, yeah, let's hold back those sizes, get them back out fresh for the London show. We've sold out tonight, we've sold out tomorrow, and yeah, that's a bummer. But it's having that active mind, which again, like it's just another form of management. And, the multiple levels of management across tour, and, you have your tour manager will sit at the very top and have to look over everything. And you break over these little sections where they're all just so time consuming and takes like a really good brain on them for it to really make sense and for the artists to get the best result.
Like you say, you got to kind of always stay on your toes because things just crop up that you would never expect and you've got to react quickly and be proactive with it all.
Yep. And, even you said before, get last minute guest list is the biggest rob for my back every single day. It'll be 10 minutes before doors and 10 names get thrown at me and I'm like, that all day. Do it now. And it's fine. It's obviously it's absolutely fine. You go, well, grand scheme of things, it is not the end of the world. But it is those sort of things, last minute guest list, last minute press requests, interviews that, were getting pushed back by a day and then all of a sudden they were bringing them forward. And it is sort of like you said, being on your toes and being reactionary to sort of have the quick thinking to go, oh, okay, fine. It throws the day out by an hour, but it's fine. It's, we'll get through it. We always do.
So as we mentioned earlier, you're on the road at the moment. Who is it you're on the road with and working with?
I'm out at the moment with the RuPaul's Drag Race Season 4 tour.
Okay.
So I'm out on this tour as a promoter rep or like generalized tour rep, and then I sort of assist our tour manager and many other bits. But our tour manager on this run has been, he's been in it for 25 years. He's a seasoned veteran. He's an incredible person to learn from. So I feel very lucky to be on the run that I am on right now. The days are long. It's 8 o'clock load in and probably a 1 a.m. get out.
Wow.
So the days are intense and they're long, but look, the artists on the tour are incredible. They're all so friendly, so it makes it worth it.
I guess, even when you have those long bad days where, it's just constant work and work and work, I guess sometimes even when you kind of have those days where it's just constant, I guess you kind of feel like lucky that your job is to just travel all over the country and other parts of the world and stuff with, talented people.
There's worse deals, isn't there?
Yeah.
And you look and go, well, especially when you've worked for an artist long standing and you've retained that client for, a number of years. And, like I remember last November, I did like a Bristol to Oslo drive for crawlers. And it was like, honestly, there was about 3 hours sleep on the whole drive for me. It was a 21-hour slog or something. And you go, well, that's a tough ride. That's a day at work like no other. But then you go, well, I go to battle for these guys. Like I work with them day in, day out every single day. And it's like, there's nothing I wouldn't do for them. So there are situations like that where you go, yeah, it's a long day, but this being work is just crazy that somehow traveling the world is your job and you get to do it with people that you actually quite enjoy spending time with. And you go, well, all in all, there's worse deals.
Definitely. So kind of going back then, I guess, what is it that made you want to pursue a career in tour management, and when did that kind of begin?
I played in a band for about 6 years. The standard crew story. Played in a band for 6 years, over many years. Realised it wasn't quite a when's crew work. But my main sort of like sticking point for it all was my band had like a couple of years where we did sort of, quite well. We managed to go and tour with some really, really cool bands, and, in turn then met a lot of really, really great professionals. And for me, we were out on a US run with Mayday Parade in like 2017. And it was just seeing their tour manager sort of like at the absolute helm of it. He, like their guy, I'm not sure whether he still does one, not his name's Denton. And he was just the most like cool, collected guy I've ever met. And, he has an artist going out and selling 3,500 tickets a night, easy.
Yeah.
And the pressure, the stress of it all is just monumental, because it's like, well, things that can go wrong with a show that size, with the production they were touring. And he just took it all on his shoulders and just took it all in a stride at every given point. I think for me, I was like, well, it's admirable anyway. And I was like, I would love to be in that position. And it sort of lit a fire underneath me to be like, well, maybe I could learn how to do this learn how to do this and then put my own little spin on it. And I think in the end, it was, we did a couple more runs after it where I loosely tour managed that, like my own band for a couple of like Europe runs and stuff. And I was like, I think I'm getting a grip of it. I felt like I was sort of getting there with it. And then I guess, you just take one job, take the next, and that sort of, obviously steamrolls. But I think what really got me into it was just seeing how incredible some people can be under such pressure. And I was like, yeah, like absolutely like some of the best professionals I've met.
Well, I guess doing it for your own band as well, I guess, as well as that kind of like being sort of your introduction into it, doing it yourself, you kind of realize the kind of stakes that are at play, because, there's the artist's livelihood is at stake, because, they make most of their money on the road, I guess.
Yeah, exactly. And, it's their livelihood's on the line. And then obviously money just being the toughest conversation ever anyway. Yeah. You make a mistake that costs them a lot of money, you're going to know about it. And I think it was funny with like doing it for my own band, because it was like, if you make a small mistake with an artist who you work for and it doesn't really affect anybody all that much, a lot of the time you can move past it and it's like, look, that won't happen again. I apologize. If you make a mistake in a band full of some of your best friends, they're never going to let you live it down. You just get the back ripped out of you for weeks. And it's like, well, trial by fire, you know what I mean? Like, I like, if you make a mistake and they just take the piss out of you for weeks, it's like, well, great. Okay. Like, I've learned the hard way. But yeah. It's look, I'd be in a position where like I've been really blessed to not make a crazy amount of mistakes like that, and and any mistakes I've ever made as a tour manager have been early days, and I'd be in the first to admit to them. Yeah. That's like the biggest thing I always sort of try and hold it to. It's like if I've missed something or if something's gone slightly wrong and I'm to blame, I'd be the first person to go, look, that was me and it's fixed.
I think that's something that's kind of true to a lot of aspects in the music industry. Like sometimes the best experience is actually doing the job, and kind of failure is the greatest teacher. Like once you've messed up, like, okay, I know not to do that ever again.
100%. Yeah, I think it wasn't worth the embarrassment or the, like the stick I got for it. And it's mad because like music universities, I've got all the time in the world for. I personally never went to university, but like, I see a lot of successful people who have come out of the likes of Lipper and Bill and stuff, and I'm like, it's incredible for them. But in a touring world, I just don't know whether there's anything better than just getting out there and doing it. Yeah. Because as you said, it is just failure is the best teacher, because you just go, well, that felt awful. You know, if like an entire tour or a day goes to total shit, you're like, well, yeah, that felt terrible. And I don't want that to ever I don't want to ever feel like that again. The only way to get around it is to just never make those same mistakes.
Like you said before, there's no tour manager 101. So you can learn all these things. You can go to university or whatever. And it's not like university is useless, because I went to university as well, but there's only so much it can prepare you for, because like you say, you've got to stay on your toes. Things will happen that you'll never, ever have anticipated or be able to prepare for. And you just got to act in the moment.
That's it. And, university it's integral in so many industries, and it's so much up, like a higher form of education, if that's what people want, incredible. But I'd say there can just never be a tour manager 101, because every single band is different. So you can learn the key fundamentals to what makes a good tour manager. It's the simple like organization and, being an upfront, honest, forward speaking person. But every single band is just all over there's still, every band will have like really similar inside jokes that you're like, how does every band joke about the same things? It makes no sense. But all of their personalities are different. And you go, well, what works for band A? Like maybe a really harsh, stern approach. For band A, that might get them right where they need to be. For band B, it might get you a swift fuck off. You just never know. What I mean? It's just how people like to be handled. And, it's because it's such a personable role, and you end up so ingrained in people's lives. You're not just their tour, maybe at some bands you are just their tour manager and you don't speak an awful lot. But a lot of bands, if you're spending months and months on the road with them, it becomes a lot more than that. You're like, well, yeah, we're friends. We hang out on days off. We go and, we go spend loads of time together. So it's like finding that middle ground to be like, well, how do you like to be spoken to? And in the same way for a tour manager to be like, well, how do I expect you to speak to me? You know what I mean?
Yeah, like I say, if you're on the road with them for so long and, sharing such a, like a enclosed space when you're on these tour buses and stuff, the least you can do is at least be civil and get to know each other. Even if you're not best friends at the end of it, at least be civil and nice to understand one another.
Yeah, it's like having a mutual understanding and just having a respect for each other, to be like, well, you're doing your job, I'm doing mine. But I've been lucky really that a lot of the artists I do work with, I do have really good relationships with, both in and out of work. I'll hang out with a lot of the artists I work with outside of a work scenario, because I think it's important. You become so close to them and the whole circle. It's like, well, if you're having a rubbish day, or, we're about to go on tour and you just had a really bad month before it, well, it absolutely pays dividends for me to know that, because it means that I can sort of do my job a bit differently. Not like dance around people, but it's like I can absolutely ensure that whatever you need, like pertinent to that issue, I can make sure that you're looked after.
Yeah, just kind of accommodate whatever situation they're going through at the time.
Exactly. Yeah, exactly.
So when it comes to like the general process of taking on a tour, where does that kind of begin? What's the kind of process before you are like hired and enlisted to be a tour manager for someone? Do you kind of like, you get the offer from like an agent and then you discuss a fee? How does it all begin?
It could depend artist to artist, but typically tour dates come in. I've looked through the route and determine how transport is even, like what transport looks like for the run. If it's a 45-day US run, you go, well, it's probably going to be a bandwagon. If it's going to be a week in the UK, it's probably going to be a sprinter. Again, all pertinent to the size of the band, but dates locked in and start budgeting, start playing around with numbers. Again, show fees very obviously, typically will come included in the first offer. So you'll work out what the band can actually afford. Start talking about rates with management, start talking about what crew they want to bring out, whether it's going to just be a TM and a front of house job, or, TM front of house merch, whether we're going the full shebang and taking 10 crew out with us. And then that's where it gets into a little bit of a lull for a week or so, where you're just changing numbers on this, on your budget to sort of fit where it needs to be.
Right.
To be like, oh, well, if I don't know, if we lose the band for an extra day where we don't really need at the start of the tour, then we can afford to do this. And, a bunch of things you end up playing with really, where you'll be on and off the phone to management for like a week straight, just being like, right, this is where I've got the budget. Do you need to lose more? Do you want to, or are you happy? And then whenever the budget does get signed off, my first thing post that is, once, a lot of the time bands, luckily, they'll have crew they normally go with, and they go, well, this is our front of house, this is our money engineer, this is who we use for backline. It's just getting in touch with those guys and be like, hey, those dates that were mentioned weeks or months ago, we've confirmed them. Hold the time in your diary. Here's the rate. Let me know if you can confirm. Once everyone confirms, get everyone to a nice, either an email thread or a group chat, introduce everyone to each other if they've not already met, or sort of get that conversation, re-rolling. And then once that is at that point, that's when I normally go into advancing and booking hotels and, working out all the physical logistics of once we're physically there. Because it can change, some crew will be absolutely staunch on the fact that they won't share a hotel room. Right. And it is little things like that. And, it's other than just don't care. They're like, well, get me a flat service and I'll sleep on it. But it's working out those small details with crew to be like, okay, so we're in Europe for 30 days. I'm going to try and configure the hotels to be like this. Are you comfortable with that? Does that work? Once you get through all of those little sort of like nitty gritty bits of detail, then I'll normally go straight out and just start booking flights, hotels, and really just piecing the tour together. I use, industry standard, I use Master Tour for everything. So all the itinerary gets inputted into Master Tour. When I feel like I'm at a place where I'm maybe 50 or 60% of the way through what I need to do, that's when I start adding people into it and letting them see where everything is at. And then past that, it just is the consistent, not catching up, but it's the consistent of, okay, we're missing this bit of information for this show. I've not had a reply from this person. You just chase, get the information in, do what you will with it. Start putting plans in place for rehearsals if the band need them. It is a long process. Typically, I like to start about 3 months out from a tour. If I had my own way every time, I'd have about 3 months before a tour to put it together so that I don't feel like I'm just setting myself on fire. Because it can feel like that at times where you take something on really short notice and it's like, got a week and a half to get this done. Like, this is ridiculous. And it does happen, but yeah.
So it sounds like one, a lot of pressure, and two, a lot of spreadsheets.
Pretty much, yeah.
Yeah.
That's pretty much, that's got to be the top and bottom of being a tour manager, pressure and spreadsheets. But
yeah,
it's also like, with all of that, then comes the wins at the other side of it. You'll get to your bigger show at all and it goes off without a hitch and you go, well, all of the stress, all of the hours of advance and all of the hours of sweating into my emails was worth it because we've just sold out, a 1,500 cap room and it just happened perfectly as it should. It's where it becomes worth it.
So ideally, you say 3 months in advance is where you would hope that they would take you on, and that's where you kind of start putting things together and making things work out. So is that kind of how far ahead your schedule usually is then? You've kind of got the next 3 months always kind of occupied, or?
I'm booked until the end of the year, pretty much.
Right.
So I know what the year looks like up until about December at the moment. Normally my 3 months is to just know that I can start work on tour. I run in November or something. There's just no justice in me doing anything for it right now because no one's thinking about that. They've got a million shows right on the end of their feet that they're like, well, let me worry about these first.
Yeah.
I think 3 months is it's a nice time. You can just you can leisurely start doing things and start building up. And then when you actually get to crunch time where you're 2 months out, a month and a half out from the tour, because you've just been doing things sort of slowly in the background for that month prior, you're sort of well, actually, I'm a lot closer to this being wrapped up than I thought I was.
Yeah.
It's just little simple things you'll, I don't know, a couple of months out, speak to the band, right, what are we doing? Are we doing a sprinter? Yeah, we're doing a sprinter, okay. Get the van held months in advance. And it's just one stress off your mind. You go, well, when it comes round to me actually having to look at this tour because it's a lot closer to being in front of me, you just go, well, okay, the main components of how we're getting there and where we're going to be staying when we're there are done. Everything else that happens in between, I've now got 2 or so months to really get through.
And you mentioned that the finances that are involved in kind of sorting it all out and obviously paying for everything. And I guess it kind of varies between tour to tour, but what kind of finances have to be kind of considered? I guess you've got travel, especially if you're bringing artists from overseas into the UK or whatever it may be, and travel once you're in the country, hotels, food.
Yeah, it's a lot. Yeah, I mean, airfare, if you bring an artist in, or if you're flying artists and crew out, then ground transport when you're actually at the place you're going to be, per diems. So I get it changes from band to band, but per diems is always sort of the one that gets thrown in the budget that needs to be considered. Keeps everyone just fed and watered when they're out on the road. Obviously, fuel, biggest one. Fuel just being as expensive as it is absolutely everywhere right now. I was trying to over budget for that a little bit. And it's sort of that mindset of being well, if I tell you it's going to be this much and then we go take $2,000 under, it's going to feel like a win. Whereas getting stung for an extra $2,000 is it's going to sting.
Much better to have a surplus.
Oh yeah, 100%.
Yeah.
And then other than that, it's your merchandise costs. If you're bringing production out on the road with you, you're doing a light package or a PA system, or you're bringing out your own front of house desk. It's all of the higher costs for that, as well as crew wage. That's that's a really hard sticking conversation with a lot of artists who are in that midriff where they're doing really well, but the money is just not there yet to bring a whole crew with them. So it's well, you're going to need the tour manager to double or triple up on his role and then need someone else to do the same. And luckily, that's always a conversation when the bands are always nice to work with and you go, well, yeah, I'll do that for you because I like you as people. But other than that, I guess the newest cost is carnet costs. We're going over to Europe with those being introduced post-Brexit. So again, just something that I guess like US fans coming in, it's always, if they're not being here before, it's always something to just be flagged to be like, look, you need a carnet, otherwise you're going to get absolutely smashed with tax when you go over to Europe. I'm sure there's a million other things to be, and if I look through one of my spreadsheets, I'm sure I'd find a million other costs. But they're the bare basics that sort of like build out a tour, and it all varies on level of how big you really are going out. If you're doing club shows, production and stuff isn't really going to be the forefront of your mind. But you're going into Brixton, that's when it's like, well, yeah, you need to think about all those sort of things.
I know it's kind of a recent subject that's kind of come up, and I don't know if you've personally dealt with it, but there's also, the recent discussion of these kind of bigger merch cuts that are happening. I guess that's something else that you've got to consider when you're going on specific tours. Yeah,
nothing annoys me more. Trust me. It's an argument I have nearly every day. And it's a tough one to try and look at it from both sides. Because you go, well, from the venue side, they're like, well, we're going to give you the staff and we're going to give you the space and, we'll take 25%. And it's like, yeah, that's all well and good if it had been asked for, but it's not being asked for, it's being inflicted.
Yeah.
And to sit there and say we're going to take 25% plus VAT of the gross amount, like, well, you're actually just bending the bands over a fucking barrel at this point. It's why so many artists are choosing not to sell merchandise at the likes of Kensington Town Forum and stuff, because it's like, well, our margins have went just exponentially lower. And it's like, so maybe your net on a t-shirt was at one point worth 15 to 16 pounds to you. It's now going to be worth like 8, 9.
Yeah,
it's still like, it's not a bad profit margin, but you go, well, no, if you feed into it, then it's only going to get worse. It's like, I've got a lot of time for bands like Trashboat who, on that run where they prevail, they just find local pubs and sell their merch out of pubs, and I'm like, well, good on you. Like, that's the active thinking and the action that people need, because it's never going to change if people just continue to allow it to happen.
Yeah, it's a smart workaround, isn't it? Because like you say, Trashboat's done that. I think I've seen a few other bands do it, but I mean, what else do they expect them to do if you're going to take such a big chunk of what is usually like the main source of their income? Yeah,
it's the only way tours go green for a support band, really. Like, especially if you're at you're at a level where you're like 1 or 3 on an arena, or maybe 2 or 3 in Academy Ones. You're like, well, the only way this tour's going green is if we do really well on merch. And for a venue like and such a massive corporation as well, in a lot of circumstances, they're globally huge, and they're like, oh yeah, we'll just steal from the little guy, and you're like, well, nah. You'd like, well, what else do you expect?
It's making stealing from the reason that people are even here to begin with.
Exactly, and I think it's a hard enough sell having a band go out on a support tour and make any money anyway. And that is a tough sell. So to make that even harder, you're like, well, nah, it can't continue to happen that way. And I hope something does change. I don't know how far along we are in that argument for it to possibly change, but I know every single day I'll rattle it down 10% if I can. And it doesn't sound like a lot, but you go, well, if I can get it from 25 down to 15, it's fine. At least it's doing something.
So as you're kind of like managing those finances and the tour's kind of in progress, I guess, do you have to pass on any of that information mid-tour to like management and stuff to say, look, this is how it's kind of going? Do we need to kind of rework the budget or anything like that?
I have daily or maybe every 2-day conversations with management when we're on the road. And that's generally, I try and do like a live P&L to the best of my ability when we're out on the road, where all of the receipts will get uploaded into one spot, all the accountants and everyone have access to them as much as they need. But then I will always try and do a sort of a, here's what we've spent and here's what we've made. And then the conversation's always open for management then for us to be like, look, on a run last year, we were doing fairly well a weekend, and the pack in the van was tight. It was like Tetris 101. It was like, one item was misplaced, nothing was fitting. It was like, we're doing pretty well. We could just throw a trailer on the back of this van for the final 2 weeks of tour and just make everyone's life that tiny bit easier.
Yeah.
Looked at the finances and it was like, well, yeah, they're making the money, so sure, that's fine. The same way, we talked about bringing like a light packaging for the bigger show at tour, and I was like, look, the money's there, but I don't think it's quite where it needs to be to justify bringing that in. So realistically, yeah, every couple of days I'm usually on the phone to management, just trying to give them the most clear picture I physically can of what's actually happening, both financially and on the road. And then when they pop along to the London show, or when they pop along to whatever show they want to come to, you haven't got 3.5 weeks of nonsense to catch them up on. They're already caught up. They know where it's at. And same with like merch, try and do like a nightly merch report. Even if they just know what we talk and the split between cash and card, you go, well, what's coming in, and that's important.
Yeah. Talk to me about advancing. What exactly is advancing in the context of tour management? Is that kind of just making sure everything's in advance planned out?
Kind of, yeah. It's like, and everyone does it differently, but it's the delivering of all the band's assets over to the venue. So, hospitality rider, tech rider, audio rider, channel list, all that sort of stuff. So the venue know, or the event know what is showing up on stage on the day. And then also what your requirements are backstage, especially from like a promoter side, you'll look and go, well, I don't know, say we've got 2 vegans, a celiac, someone who's lactose intolerant. It's making all of these things known to be like, the band and crew are going to need to be accommodated during their time at this event or time in this venue, as well as getting all your parking situation sorted, getting all your timing sorted, ensuring even like little simple things like there's bath towels for you when you show up so everyone can get a shower after a long drive, and making sure that your dressing rooms are allocated sensibly. And like I not always, but I always do try and like to run a closed dressing room for the band, because it can just be stressful being on the road, and it's a lot of pressure and it's exhausting both mentally and physically. So it's like getting that across to the venues early doors and the 2 months out from the show to be like, look, we want the dressing room just strictly closed to just band and crew.
Right.
Because at this point, we're like, maybe we're going to be 18 shows into it all. Everyone's just going to be legged. They're going to be knackered. So it's like, let's sort of ensure that the band's safety and the band's comfortability is thought about before we even get to the venue. And then, in other forms of advance, and it's, festival advance is very different. A lot of the time you get hit with like a form and you just fill it out and that's it. But everyone at that point, you're going to be rolling up to the festival, probably picking a caterer and then just like throwing together the show in half an hour on a changeover. Yeah. And that's fine because everyone knows what you're getting for that. And then it's flight logistics. So all of that comes as part of the advance, doesn't it? Where you try and avoid the 1,000,001 questions you're actually going to be asked by the band. You can just go, look, everything's sorted. It's all a master tour. If you have a question, find the answer in there. If you can't find the answer in there, then come back to me and then I'll answer it.
Yeah. Well, you mentioned, festival there. I guess that's quite intense as well, because you've got to be there at a certain time for the band to kind of get ready and have to go on stage. And then there's obviously between that point, you've got to kind of squeeze in, as you mentioned, like catering, press and all that kind of stuff. So
yeah, the festival days for what really should, what in theory people go, well, you're only playing half an hour, and you're like, yeah, but it's easily a 10-hour, 12-hour day. Usually like, well, the band want to get the festival site early so like they can get ready, press, interviews, making sure they're eating. Inevitably, there'll be about 5 bands on the bill I also want to go watch. And it's like all of those things that, again, you have to just look at the bigger picture and say it's not actually just about just getting them on stage on time. You go, well, you're off to like, I don't know, Live at Leeds Festival or something. And you go, well, we could just get there 2 hours before we play and everyone can sit in the van till 5 minutes before they're due on. Or we can get there at midday. You can go for an explore around the festival site, go watch some bands, go do whatever you want. And it's ultimately like every band has their own preference on how they want to do it. But it does turn those, what could be a 6-hour day into a 12-hour day. But I never mind. Like, I don't mind getting about and doing things. It's part and part of it. It makes the job fun when you can, I don't know, finish a set, get everything back in the van and then go watch someone.
Yeah. And sometimes you don't really have that ability either, because sometimes they'll be playing a festival and then they've got to shoot off pretty quickly because they've got to get to another show, maybe at the other side of the country or even in a different country.
Yeah, I had a show last month where we were playing direct support and then headlining a festival the same night. So it was like literally just throwing the back line in the back of the van and driving literally immediately after the band came off stage to get to the second show.
Wow, okay.
Which was intense. And then in June, I think I have a routing where it's like Download Festival, day off, and then a show in the Czech Republic. It's like a 19-hour drive to just be done in a day. But again, that's part and part of it. And when the band and the people are worth it, because you get along with them, you're like, well, sure, we'll do that. Yeah. It'll be absolutely dreadful at the time, but we'll do it.
So when you take on a tour as a tour manager, are you often looking after all of the bands on the bill, or is it just tends to be just the one band? Just
the one, normally.
Right.
I'm sure that, and I'm sure there is unique times where maybe like a tour manager has like a couple of bands he works with, or they work with, who maybe 2 of them end up on the same tour and you can double up. But a lot of the time you're going out solely on that band, and that's kind of it. Festivals, again, a little bit different, because the lineups are just so humongous that can be a little bit of a bleed, but I've only ever really went out with one.
So if you're taking on a tour, I mean, you kind of mentioned stuff about this earlier, but if you're taking on a tour where the tour runs through like multiple countries, like if you're in mainland Europe, so you're going through like France, Germany, what extra arrangements do you have to make? You mentioned post-Brexit world when you're coming from the UK through there, like you say, you've got to do all these extra kind of forms and
Yep.
I guess get visas sorted out and stuff like that.
Yeah, so carnets are the biggest one for Europe. That's really like the biggest sticking point is having an equipment carnet. Otherwise, I think it's that you pay the tax on the value of the items to get it into the country because it's classed as an import and it's a headache. No one wants it. So that's really the biggest one for Europe, and it's giving yourself the correct lead time to really have that in time. And it's funny because you can turn one round in a day, but it's just not fair to put that on anybody. And again, it does happen sometimes where bands don't realize they need them, and then you go, well, we're going to need this in 24 hours. And it's a bummer when it happens. But yeah, I think carnets are the biggest one. And then I know there's the new 90-day rule in Europe where if you're spending any more than 90 days in the country I think it's in a 6-month period, you have to have a new type of visa to go along with your passport. That's not become a problem of mine yet because I haven't spent that much time in Europe. But I do know people who are having to look into it now where the question is whether you need to have a visa that just covers you for mainland or whether you need to have country-specific visas.
Right.
But that's a thing that is like very much it's like on UK Tour and Crew every 2 minutes there's questions about it because I just don't think it's just uncharted territory for everybody. But in any other arrangements for Europe really it's mostly when you get to countries that, have got like hard borders and you're going to get stopped and it's like, oh, well, let's, account for more time going to Switzerland because you're more than likely going to get pulled off to one side and get put on a weighbridge, or they're going to want to stop you and check your passport, or, like we have the vignettes for European motorways, you've got to stop and pick one of those up. And it's just a multitude of those things. And it's only, they only take a couple of minutes at a time, really, but it's not riding yourself to the minute where you're like, oh, we're setting off now and we're due to arrive, bang on when loading is. It's like, well, no, inevitably someone's going to want to stop. We need to stop and, go and pick up a vignette, or, we're going to need to refill up the van. And it's just making those time allowances along the way to be like, let's keep an hour and a half in our back pocket that no one really knows we have.
Yeah, I guess you say, that it's a few minutes, but if all these things kind of happen in one kind of run, it adds up.
Yeah, that's it. And then you're late. And it typically it is all right with Europe. There isn't many countries with hard borders. You can pass over it from France, Belgium, Germany, Netherlands, and there's nothing stopping you. You just cross the border and that's it. But it is when you get, especially coming from the UK in, I've known a couple of bands who definitely during the teething period of the whole carnet situation, they were sent back to the UK to get their carnet properly stamped.
Right.
And you're like, so you've already went over on the ferry, like an hour and 40 or maybe an hour and a half. And then the French police have told you can't come in. You've got to go back to the UK, get it stamped properly, and then do the journey again. And it's little things like that. It's a nightmare. It's an absolute nightmare. And you're like, wouldn't wish it on my worst enemy. Because it's just awful. But they're like the allowances, I guess, when you're on the UK side to make sure that everything's done correctly. You're like, well, look, that doesn't look right. So let's look at it one more time because I don't want to come back here.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah. Want to avoid that as much as possible.
100%.
Yeah.
100%.
So I believe you work with The Black Case, which is kind of like an independent music company. Do you work freelance with them, or is it kind of like a full-time thing?
Yeah, it's a full-time thing. Me and my business partner, James, it's sort of like try and treat it as like a one-stop shop for all touring entertainers. It's, you need, and it's trying to brand it in a way to be like, look, if you just need a vehicle and a tour manager, we can do that. If you need a vehicle, a tour manager, and full crew, we can also do that. If you need a bus full of production and 10 crew, we can also do that. It's sort of acting as like that, instead of, and it can get, I imagine for management, and especially for me when I have to do it, it does get a little bit stressful where you're pulling quotes from a multitude of different companies to, all bring into the one tour. It's to try and eliminate that stress. Management come and just go, look, there's the requirements for the tour, go make it happen. And then we go away, we pull all these things together, get everyone in the right place, get everyone together and say, right, there's your tour. And that's like the idea behind it is to be an artist and a management friendly company in a way that artists get the same tour manager every time if they want. You can say, look, we love the person who did it last time. Let's just keep them for everything now.
Yeah.
And then management get a really, really transparent view of all their finances. They get a really transparent view of everything that's going on the road. Keep them updated with everything to do with merchandise and stock numbers. And it's all about just growing that relationship. It's, I would say, like, budgets always seems to be the biggest sticking point in this sector of the industry. Budgets is massive. And you go, well, if a management company have given you 10 clients and then they come to you with a band who haven't quite got that budget behind them, and you're like, well, yeah, we'll do you the favor. Come on. Like, we work together on everything else. And sort of what we're trying to sort of create is like an ecosystem for bands that they can come and get absolutely everything they need whilst also not being rinsed for doing it. because there is a lot of that too. There's a lot of, it's like trying to pull things in, and like rental prices are going up and up and up at the moment for just about everything. I think our whole thing is trying to keep it fair for the artists, so that it can be fair for us and that can be fair for management, and everybody wins.
Yeah, because it's got to be one, profitable for you, but also reasonable for the artists that kind of come to you and the managements that come to you.
True. Like, but if there's no band, I haven't got a job, and management haven't got a job, and it's like they do sort of like fulfill each other. Where like if you just sent a band on tour on their own, it'd be an absolute clusterfuck, it'd be a disaster. But without them, we wouldn't have a job. But without us, they wouldn't get to where they need to be, as safely as maybe they would. So it's just having that mutual respect for each other and just saying, you need the band to get to a certain place here. You need all of these things along the way. We can do it all for you, and we're not also, we're not going to bleed you dry for doing it.
Well, there's a lot of aspects to tour management, kind of discussed over this conversation so far. Mm-hmm. Is there a particular aspect of the job that you enjoy the most? And I guess likewise, is there a part that you enjoy the least?
Favorite part of the job? I mean, it's tough, but like I always say, like the first 5 or so minutes of the band being on stage is like the best part of the day for me, because it is like the culmination of all the hard work through the day. And although you see the show every night, you never get bored of those first 5 minutes, because you're like, that's where the energy is the highest and the crowd is the loudest. And you sort of look and go, well, in my own way, I've been an integral part of bringing that together. And I think that's a really nice, fulfilling thing to have every single day, especially when you're close to the band. And, you look and go, well, you're all some of the closest people I have in my life, because I literally spend more time with you than I do anybody. And you can build this whole world for them. And those first 5 minutes are just incredible. So I think it's got to be one of my favorite parts of it. And then also with that, the sort of the biggest show at tour is always it was the nicest one too, because you've got management and label and their press team, and everyone will come out to that one show, and that's when pressure's on. It's like, well, if you're going to make any mistakes or if anything was going to go wrong, it can't be on tonight's show. And really nailing like a London show or a hometown show, and being able to finish for the day, and even just sitting down, like having a beer with management, and they're like, not, you don't do it for the thanks. That's not why you do it, but to know that they haven't got anything negative to say, and they'll go, look, everything happened perfectly, and you're like, well, that's all the reward I need for it. The fact that it went down well and you have nothing to complain about, that is fine by me. I'd say worst part of the job, tough one, because like I genuinely do love what I do. Like I don't see many negative things in what I do at all. It's a lot of time away from home, but I knew that time enough for it.
Yeah.
I'd say one of the aspects that is tough is like starting a drive that's about 18 hours long. And you look at Google Maps and you go, oh yeah, it's gonna suck. And there's gonna be a spicy drive. But other than that, I think it's hard, because like obviously having a lot of self-employed people in the industry, you burn the candle at both ends, and fatigue is just rife. People are burning themselves to the ground, working as hard as they can to earn as much as they can, because got to make a living. But it's definitely one of the hard things about the job is battling that fatigue and being like, well, I can't stop. But then you're also like, well, I need to look after myself. And I've only really learned that the last like 12 or so months is the importance of looking after yourself on the road. Like I've always been a healthy eater. I'll always eat healthy. But then I'm the sort of guy who will, sleep for 3 hours and have a coffee for breakfast and then get going again. And I'm like, that is just so counterproductive to me.
That's not very healthy.
Yeah. And like it's that battle, and I've got a lot better with it this year. But that's definitely one of the tough ones, where you're like, oh God, yeah, I'd love to sleep 8 hours. And you go, well, in what time, mate?
Yeah.
You need an extra 8 hours in the day for you to get that in.
Yeah, you talk about pressure. There's a lot of pressure in the job, because kind of a lot of the day-to-day of a tour relies on you, because you are the tour manager. And then you mentioned fatigue as well. How do you kind of, mentally look after yourself and physically look after yourself when you're on the road and doing all these things, and all this, like you say, pressure is just on your shoulders to make sure everything works and goes as it should? Yeah,
it would differ person to person, I feel. But I think for me, it's like my peace of mind is like knowing that everything is sort of done. It's not like, my peace of mind isn't sitting in bed and watching a film for 4 hours. Like, I'll do that, but I find that I'm at my most relaxed when I'm caught up with just about everything that's expected of me. So to relax for me would be, if there's a day off or something, I get up like stupid early, crack through absolutely every single email I've got to get through. I'd go to the gym, shower, and then get out and go for a walk, and just get as much fresh air in as possible, because you get none when you're stuck in a venue all day. You are literally just in the four walls of the venue. So I think to look after myself mentally would just be giving myself that time on days off, and God forbid you get a spare hour on a show day. I try my best to not spend it deep into emails. I'll try and get out for a walk, or, even just like, I love going to like different coffee shops. It's like one of my favorite things about going on tour is the fact that I can just go to a random spot every single day. And it's like, well, if we've got through loading and everything's looking good and it's like, 4:00 or something, it's like, well, yeah, I'll take half an hour. Just go out, grab myself a coffee, have a little walk around, take a picture or something. It's always nice to be able to look back and remember some spots that you have been. And then it's also, on the flip side of that is, once you've had your day off and you've done all that, getting an actual good night's sleep. Because it's so easy sometimes to be like, oh, it's a day off, I'm going to have loads of beers because like I've been knackered and, it's the only time I'm getting. And then you wake up the next day just feeling awful. And then you spend the whole day off feeling terrible and feeling sorry for yourself. And it's like, well, it's having that mindfulness to be like, that feels like the natural response, but it shouldn't be.
Yeah. So, there'll be bands that are kind of growing and maybe taking on a tour manager for the first time, so not doing like a small local run or whatever it may be. What should they expect when they first work with a tour manager?
I think bringing in a tour manager at like a lower level, or, you're doing like a local run and you want someone to sort of help assist, is I think you just need to see all of the things that you would naturally worry about be answered before you have to answer them. So it's, you bring someone in, you're like, oh, I wonder what time loading is, or, I wonder what time we're going to have to leave, or, I wonder how much this van's going to cost us, or I wonder if we're even traveling in a van. You want to bring in a tour manager who will just take a grasp of that and be like, okay, I'll go book the van. I'll find out what time loading is every day. And, at that level of doing it really locally, that's a lot easier than, maybe having to reach out to a headline tour manager, or having to, reach out to, a national promoter and wait a couple of weeks for them to put the advance together to send it to you. But yeah, for a newer band, bringing in a tour manager, I think it's a lot less of like people management, and it's more of just making sure that everyone's safe and that the day is going according to time. And it's like, I'm going to get you where you need to be on time, and I'm going to make sure I do it safely. And then slight people management, I suppose, like in the way of being like, okay, well, I'm going to make sure that you're ready for stage on time, and I'm going to make sure the set list and the waters on stage as, the most basic thing possible. And then I guess also sort of give a hand with loading the van back up, and, again, just making sure the band feel looked after and that they're not just out there on their own, because for newer bands, I can imagine it is terrifying even just getting thrown on like a week or two's tour where you're like, well, I don't know what's going on.
Yeah.
And especially if you are out for a week or two, you're like, well, where are we staying? Are we doing hotels? Are we crashing on people's floors? Do you know these people? Are they safe? Are they sensible? It's taking that responsibility and saying, well, if someone's never done this before, you really need to take it at a pace where they're not going to do it once and go, well, I'm never doing that again.
Yeah, because I guess if they've never took out worked with a tour manager before, they might not necessarily know what makes a good tour manager, what makes a bad tour manager, whether this tour manager, because in every kind of industry and role, there'll be people that kind of take the piss, and you don't want to take someone on who's going to just take the piss and kind of just get paid for doing very, very little.
Yeah, exactly. And it is that sort of, it is that thing of being like, well, how much you having to do yourself? And if you're having to, and it can differ, like say the guitarist of the band has access to the card and they're the only one who does, and they don't want to pass the card details out. So like, I'm just going to book them all. That's obviously fine. But if you're dealing, like you want to be dealing with someone who's like, look, I will book the van, I will book the hotels, I will advance the whole thing and find out what time we're loading in, what time we're playing, what time we need to be out. You want to be with someone who is going to actively have the hunger to go and find that out for you, so that you're not having to fret and like worry about these sorts of things. And again, it is the beauty of someone going, oh, what time's this happening? And you just go, check the app. It's all there. And that's really what you want, is to be able to not feel like you're having to ask 21 questions to get any information out to someone. Some things can't be helped, but for the most part, you want to be able to just say, well, I don't even have to bother them. They've already answered it in this app.
And for people who are listening who want to know more about, being a tour manager themselves and wanting to kind of go into that role, what advice would you give to them? Do they need to kind of have a grasp and a good idea of how a tour runs beforehand? Does it work better if they've been in a band before? Do they need to have had roles in another part of a tour?
I'd always recommend trying to get out on a run as something that's not a tour manager first, and try and shadow as much as you can. I think if you can go out as like a merchandiser, a backline technician, anything that you feel skilled enough in to get you out on the road, I would always recommend trying to get out on something to examine how someone works every single day. Now, that always might not be the best thing, because you might end up with a really bad tour manager and you're learning all the wrong things. But I feel like through COVID and, just after that whole blip, I feel like I think the industry shed a lot of dead wood, to be honest. And a lot of tour managers who stuck around are really good ones. So getting out on a run, that is something that's not tour management to start you off. It gives you a different perspective of, well, this is how long my day is now and I'm only doing this role. If I go out as a TM, they're probably going to be doubling my work hours. And is that possible? How do you see that person dealing with it? The general advice, as corny as it may sound, is just work your ass off. Like it's tough, isn't it? Because you go, well, there's no 101. And you go, well, at the same time, if there was a 101, it would be grasp the basics and work harder than you think you could ever work. Because all it takes is you get it right with one artist and they blow, and that's it. You don't ever have to worry ever again. There's so many different dynamics to it. There's so many different things. Again, every artist differs, every situation differs, every tour differs. But it is just being willing to work hard and being willing to put yourself out there for someone on Crawler's first ever US run. I drove, I tour managed, I backline tech, then I sold merch. I was I had 4 deep on a job, just me. I was the only member of crew on the whole tour. And I did that, one, because they're some of my best friends, but also because it was they need someone to do that and they can't afford to go and pay 3 people to do that job. So if I'm the person that's being looked at, then I'll deliver that tour to them in the best of my ability. And I think it's important to just have that, because I think it maybe not completely gone are the days where that would be taken advantage of, but I feel like we're in a good place where showing willing to work hard will get you a lot further than trying to stay hard on certain things,
Yeah.
But I've always said, and I don't know how much my word is actually of use to anyone, really, but my inbox is always open. I'm happy to speak to anyone about anything. If anyone needs advice, help, the lot, I'm always there to speak to them, because I didn't start tour management from a place of picking up a big band or anything. I've just worked for the last probably 8 or so years, really making this full time.
You mentioned before that you kind of booked up pretty much for the year now. Yep. I imagine there's a few tours you can't mention yet, but what else have you got planned for the rest of the year? What are you working on?
Oh God, what am I working on? I'm back out with RuPaul at the end of the year. Right. So that's a sort of October, November run. That's going into arenas. So I'll be out on the Work the World tour then. I have a European and American tour running through June and July. I can't really say anything about that other than that. Bunch of festivals with Crawlers throughout summer. So doing Live at Leeds in May. We are doing Victorious Festival in August. And then got a bunch of stuff with Crawlers planned for the end of the year. Just getting into with those guys really and starting to plan, what time pass that looks like. But everything else I think I'm on is actually unannounced, and I'm not actually allowed to say anything, which is funny. But the situation where I'm at, it's good. And I think last year was busy, and for last year was pretty much at capacity, and this year's ended up even busier. And I'm dreading to think what 2024 is going to be like. If that's a sort of trajectory, I'm like, well, I'm not going to be home next year. There's no point in me having my apartment. There's no point in me having any of that. But it's where we're at.
Well, it's a good problem to have. Constant work.
Oh, 100%. And I say incredibly blessed to do it. I couldn't be more thankful for anyone who actually has me, because it's it's wild to me that this is a job. I'm like, well, I love what I do and it is work, and I'm absolutely destroyed at the end of the tour. I'm exhausted, but I wouldn't have it any other way.
And what's even better is you're your own boss as well. You don't have to kind of really answer to anyone, bar the people you work with. We said before, sending over finances and stuff like that, but that's just part of the job. That's not you really being below someone, not you speaking to someone's boss or anything like that.
Yeah, that's it. And it sort of almost feels like a collaborative effort at times. In the end, you become that close with management. You look after the band on and off tour all the time, because I live in the vicinity of Crawler, so we all live 10 minutes away from each other, which in turn means that I'm doing things when we're not on tour for them, just because it's easier. And it does feel in the end like a big group effort, because it's well, you're looking at it as a team, and you're like, well, all I'm telling you the finances, I'm telling you how merch is looking, and I'm telling you all of these things. We feel the win together, because it's management have booked it for me to bring, for me to put it together, for the band to go and do it, and we just continue that circle all year round, where it's management get the win by securing the opportunity, I get the win by putting it together, and then the band get the win for actually going and doing it. And at the end, we all sort of group back together and go, well, perfect, on to the next one.
Yeah. Thanks very much for your time, Mark. I really appreciate it. Before this conversation, I didn't really know too much about tour manager. I knew like kind of the basic overviews of it and kind of from a press standpoint as well. But yeah, really insightful. I'm sure people listening to this are going to learn a lot about what a tour manager is and does and how that kind of all fits into, you know, a live show of any kind, whether that's just one show or a whole tour. Before I let you go and enjoy the rest of your day off, you know, your rare days off, have you got any final words you want to say? Anything you want to plug? Anything that we've not mentioned that you want to mention?
No, generally, man, I just thank you very much for having me. Let me speak and let me explain what it is I do. It's an interesting one. I don't feel like, although crew spotlights are often seen now, I feel like for a long time they weren't. And I think it's cool for people, if they are interested, to get an understanding of what actually happens and, you know, the challenges and things that can come, because there's far more crew than there is bands. It's nice to sort of get an inside perspective of how that all works. So thank you for allowing me the space and the opportunity to speak about that.
Absolutely, man. Like I said, I'll let you go and enjoy the rest of your day. Thanks again for chatting to me, and take care. I'll see you later.
All right, man. Thanks so much, Zach. Take care.
Bye. And that is it. Thank you so much for listening. Again, if you enjoyed this or any other episode of the podcast, then please leave a rating and review wherever you're listening to this. If you want to support the podcast further, you can go and give it a follow on social media, pick up something from the merch store, or subscribe to the Patreon to get early access to episodes. All the links can be found at itsnotaphase.co.uk. That's itsnotaphase.co.uk. Thanks again, hopefully catch you on the next one, and remember, it's not a phase, it's a lifestyle.